What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care and also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, otherwise known as the GFDI. It is a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. We're broadcasting live here on May 30th. Yes, the end of May is almost done. The month is almost done. And we're live on a Sunday afternoon. And as we do on most Sunday afternoons, we have Black Canada Talking. And Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. This is the last Sunday of the month. So traditionally, what we do is we do our roundtable with our friends and panel. And today we've got Sarah, Warren, Cesar. Elle should be joining us probably in a little bit. She's been asked to take another commitment that she wanted to get done in place of someone. So let's bring our three panelists on that we have. We got Sarah.
Good afternoon, Dr. Vibe, and happy end of African Unity, African Liberation Month.
Wonderful. Right back at you. And we've got Cesar. Hey, Cesar, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And Warren Clarke, like I'm telling you, these three individuals and Elle, they are past busy. They're just on overdrive. So when I can get them once a month, I feel very privileged. But I hope everyone is having a good day, a okay year so far. And what we're going to start off with, our first conversation topic, this story has just rocked people's souls right around the world. The finding of 215 Indigenous young people's bodies underneath a school in the British Columbia area. This, like I was hosting a conversation last night with some people from the United States and saying, what's going on in your country? So who would like to chat on this one first? Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah's been fired up for the last half an hour, folks. So just let her go.
So first, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the Algonquin, the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. I'm on the Quebec side of that territory. And I'm still grappling with, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I participated in, a number of the marches with survivors of the residential school experience, nightmare, I would say. And so this just brings back the trauma as someone experiencing their trauma, like secondhand. And just the idea that you would rape and, just mete out such violence on such young human beings, little kids, apparently as young as 4. And then after they die from malnutrition or just, the abuse, you just, dig up graves and then you go and you bury them and then you don't tell anybody. And then it stays there for God knows how long. How do you live with yourself? How do you live yourself? It just sort of reminds me of the evil of, let's just say what it is, the evil of white supremacy and state-sanctioned violence like that, the lengths to which it will go. And what doesn't help is, for me, it's sort of colliding in my head and in my psyche with the commemoration of Tulsa, which is another expression of this violent, naked, racial hatred. I'm going to stop there.
Warren? You are on mute, Mr. Warren.
Yes, it's thank you. I'm used to StreamYard now because I've been on so many Zoom calls, right? So, Sarah, thank you for opening us up. Appreciate it, and thanks for sharing the space with me, Sarah. It's our first time speaking on a panel together, I think.
Yeah, it is.
So much appreciated to you, and Cesar, always a pleasure. Here's the thing. We shouldn't be shocked, and I say this with respect, not to disrespect indigenous communities. And I say we shouldn't be shocked because this is another steering of its ugly head of white supremacy, just echoing a little bit of what Sarah mentioned. But the extent of how dangerous and manipulative and this ongoing structural violence that's been happening in this country particularly. Now, Sarah, I understand that you had coupled and conflated Tulsa, respectfully. And I'm always of mind to let's always keep our conversation focused on Canada for one reason only, is let's not give them a pass. Because there's too many moments, and we're going to talk about George Floyd in a moment. I know it's one of our subtopics. There's too many moments where we look to the United States and say, well, it's not as bad over there. Not saying you said that. Or we try to say, well, it's on comparison too. No, we have our own concerns. We have our own issues when it comes to anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism in this country. This is just another example. Let me give you a situation that happened to me this week. Actually, I was in a meeting, and one of the participants in the meeting I was sharing space with said they were talking about their home was built by colonizers, right? And they said these great colonizers. And I said, excuse me, what do you mean by great colonizers? I never heard the expression. But here's an example here in our Canadian moments that we are using words that there are indirectly, unconsciously, but consciously and directly giving a pass to these white settler colonizers who has done something like this that we found out today with the 215 young people who died. So this is another example, another reminder that Canada's backyard stinks, and it has been stinking for many, many years. Now, here's and something, Sarah, you and I were speaking backstage respectfully, accountability. That's the word for me when it comes to this. How do we really right the wrong as Canadians? But more so, and I'm going to call the name, how does Justin Trudeau and his government lead the charge to right the wrong? How does that happen? What does that look like? We already have a sitting prime minister who committed and wore blackface and brownface in public. So this is another move that I'm trusting, instead of he going on Twitter or these social media sites and just saying, I'm sorry, this has happened. What next? Do we really want to get rid of anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism in this country? Or do we want to continue saying, we saw it, I'm sorry to hear it, let's move on with our lives? I don't know. Cesar, what do you think?
I think alongside what you just said, look, why surprise? There's no surprise. This is just, I'm not sure if what's more surprising is the number of children in regards to that residential school. I don't know if what would make so many more people upset is the fact of so-called apology from the archdiocese, when actually they just keep representing the same institution of colonization, of basically colonizing, and also turning Christians, all the savages, as indigenous people worldwide, not just in Canada or the US, but worldwide, have been represented. And as you know, by extension, us Black people as well. I stand in sympathy and solidarity to our Indigenous brothers and sisters in Canada. But let's also not forget, and Sarah said it so well, in linking with the Tulsa massacre in the United States that is not taught in schools. So many massacres all over Africa, from Kenya to Cameroon, Nigeria, etc., white supremacy. Because let us not lose focus on residential schools, the church. No, it's beyond that. It's white supremacy in all institutions. How many children, women, and men who are not white have they killed worldwide? And to what extent are we daring to chase for that truth, to chase for the reparations, but also to educate our own people to stand up truly without fear in speaking the truth? The bodies are there, they're already dead. The only way we can honor them is to stand up and speak for them. This is part of Canada's shame. This is not part of the postcard Canada likes to send to the Haitians coming here, the Africans coming here, the Arabs and the Asians coming here as some type of, number 3 or number 1 country to live in by the United Nations. No, this is Canada's reality that they try to hide by always pointing the finger to the United States. Mm-hmm. So I stand, and I know I'm not the only one, I stand in sympathy and solidarity to our Indigenous sisters and brothers for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and also the missing and murdered Indigenous boys and men.
I'd also like to, since Warren very rightly brought up the Trudeau government, yes, the residential schools did not happen under his government. Well, I don't care, because at the end of the day, the white people who came after that era or whatever, in one way or another, have continued to oppress, suppress, and commit violence against Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, Métis. One thing I would like to see for the government of Canada to stop fighting all the organizations that are fighting to make sure that our Indigenous children have the same quality of, is it education they were looking for, and healthcare. Because the government of Canada, in our names, spends millions of dollars fighting these cases after it's been proven that, yeah, there are inequities in the way Indigenous children are served, whether it's on or off reserve or whatever. Here is the case. Here are our lawyers. We've gone all the way to the Supreme Court. What the hell are you doing fighting these people with our tax dollars? You're wrong. Make it right. Give these children even the basics of what they need. Another thing I'd like to see, the water. Something as basic as water, like improve while we're seeking justice for the missing, murdered, and buried. Let's also get social justice right now for the living, for the ones who don't have adequate mental health services, who don't have clean access to clean water, who don't have good schooling, and the ones who continue to be beaten up and roughed up by the RCMP. Why don't we do that instead of performative, actions?
Okay.
I think I'm going to stop because I need Valium or something. I'm so.
So how should Black Canadians respond to this story?
Warren, yeah.
Go ahead, Warren.
educate yourself. We don't know enough about this Canadian histories in our communities, our Black communities. We don't. We also need to acknowledge that in the barbershop talk, which happened last month. Yeah, last month. The theme was respecting and appreciating our elders, which we don't do enough of in our Black communities. We need to learn from our elders to understand, what happened in our past is also happening in our future, in our contemporary moments, and could also happen in our future. I'm going to always come from the education lens because that's what I do in a career. I'm an educator. But there's other ways of, before political action, I'm going to always side with encouraging people to seek knowledge and how do we understand these oppressive practices. What are the social oppressions at play, and how do we mobilize social justice to actually seek true social liberation for people who are marginalized in this country. That's what I would suggest. I'm not sure what Sarah or Cesar would add to that in terms of adding value.
Please go ahead. I'll go after you.
No, I'll go after you.
I would just say we have to never forget where we are. I mean, Canada is not the worst country to live in by far, of course. But there is a fundamental problem if we satisfy ourselves with being Black, having access to clean drinking water. And again, that's relative because some Black communities, when you think of notably Africville and communities impacted by environmental racism, don't have access to that. But we cannot be content with having access to clean drinking water, while the indigenous, too many, not all of course, but too many indigenous people of this very nation where we are in, by immigration, some as descendant of US slavery, those indigenous people of this land do not have clean drinking water. Educating ourselves regarding our own past, our own leaders, but also standing up for our community must come with an acknowledgement of the disproportionalities and disparities affecting, through systemic racism and anti-indigenous discrimination, those who are here in the land, because there are so many similarities and intersections of oppression affecting them that also oppress us. That's what I would say.
Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, the colonial background from which we come, especially myself and those of us from the continent, like it's yesterday, like it's not a very remote and far away past. But one thing I would like to say is that ever since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we went through that whole exercise, and that history was even dug up in the first place. I have to admit, even working alongside, in the community with First Nations people, I really had no idea of the extent of the residential school system and how many generations it has impacted and how it finds expression today. And what I was glad to see over the last few years, and interestingly, during the pandemic, is more of a coming together between the Black community and the Indigenous communities here in Ottawa and on this side in Gatineau, where there were several events where Black youth and Indigenous youth got together in events where they talked about racism and their experiences with racism together, and discovered that they really have a great interest in building the solidarity between them. So yes, learning about this history, learning about it deeply, not just what, a CBC report or a CTV clip, or no, the actual really going, to the Indigenous organizations, the Wabano Center, etc., and finding out what really happened, preferably from the people who are descendants of those who experienced that. And after you've done that, if you're old enough to vote, when you are voting, always keep at the back of your mind what is so-and-so's position, not just on the Black community, but what is their position on issues affecting our First Peoples, right? What are conservatives saying about that? What are the NDP saying about that? What is their record on that? Are they likely to deliver on that? Build that into your decision at the ballot box.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Great start, everyone. Watching Black Canada Talking, May 30th. And unfortunately, we only do these once a month, and there's so much stuff that goes on in a month, let alone in a day these days. So we're going to do some catching up on, it's just a little over the George Floyd murder and the movement it sparked. But what has changed? What has changed in the last year? Who would like to start on this conversation topic?
I'll let someone else start. I have a whole list of things, but
Let Warren put up his hand. Warren, go for it, man.
yeah.
You're on mute again, Warren. Oh, there we go.
Here we go. So sorry, folks.
It's all right, no worries.
Not much, in my opinion. Not much. We're still seeing moments and senses of anti-Black racism. We're still seeing moments of not only anti-Black racism, but that's coupled with sexism. Particularly, this is where we're still seeing many African descent men who are facing, police brutality. They're facing moments of, discrimination based on their gender, not only in among police, but in the education system. So when we say, what has changed, the only thing we can say is that corporate companies and nonprofit organizations are taking more of a stand and saying let's practice anti-oppression, anti-racism frameworks to educate our staff, right? Some of these moments where these organizations are doing that, some of them are just doing a one and done training. As an example, I'm not trying to segue too far. I'm just going to give an example here. But there's no practice in understanding how to be anti-racist, how to understand what anti-Black racism does for African descent people. So if we don't practice, we don't put anything into practice of actually understanding how to dismantle anti-Black racism, how could we ever get to the moment of really gaining a sense of people feeling a belonging in this Canadian society? Now I know the murdering of George Floyd happened in the United States, so we can't forget the location of where this happened, because the United States is a different country and different types of moments of anti-Black racism, particularly on Black men's bodies. But we're still seeing moments where they're screaming out "no justice, no peace" for different Black men who've been murdered in the last few months, right? So what is really changing the narrative? All we know, for example, is that we have the United States has a new administration, that's speaking to the tune of we want to make change, but yet has not signed any legislation to make change, right? They've signed in the anti-Asian hate bill. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing or not saying that correctly. But yet there's the Emmett Till bill that was supposed to be has been 22 years in the making or plus that has not been signed into legislation. So when we think about Black lives, particularly these Western nation states, what does it really matter? What does it count for? The thing is, we have to also keep in mind who is representing Black lives in these spaces, right? Do they know enough information, know enough education on how to seek proper ways of mobilizing policies to actually give Black Canadians or Black Americans a sense of belonging in these countries? Or we just continue to mention something that sounds like anti-Black racism, but it really is not mobilizing any change. So in my opinion, I don't think there's been a significant push to actually address and to say that, we need to actually consider what's at stake here when we keep on pressing African descent people. That was my 2 cents.
Thanks, Warren. Who's next?
So I'll just quickly talk about what I've seen change, like from my experience. So first of all, Black History Month this year was just crazy. I have never been busier, actually, since last summer. And I'm sure it's the same with, other community activists and advocates, etc., who have to, do these presentations on Black history, culture, etc. So, busy. And the fact that everything was virtual because of the pandemic. There was more of a demand. But like Warren was saying, the one and done phenomenon where, after giving presentations to DND and the revenue agency and this other department and that organization or whatever, you're still hearing about these federal public servants who have to launch a class action suit against the same government of Canada because there's no accountability for mostly white superiors who deprive them of career advancement, fair working conditions, or who just plain harass them. So another thing that I saw as well, mainstream media all of a sudden seemed to figure out that if Black Lives Matter, Black commentators matter, Black viewpoints matter, and all of a sudden you got all these Black commentators on mainstream media. I also like the fact that Black employees in different organizations and companies and institutions came forward publicly to talk about their experience with anti-Black racism, and some of them included some of my colleagues in the mainstream media. Here in Ottawa, we had Stefan Keys, who did some amazing, who gave some amazing testimonial. Tracy Moore over there in Toronto, and Adrian Harewood here in Ottawa as well. More Black content creators, because now all of a sudden everybody wants Black stories. Everybody wants to know what Black people think, blah, blah, blah. And with this sort of shift in looking at who should be telling the story, more Black content creators came out and created their own avenues. Dr. Vibe, you've been at this for a while, but with what happened last year, for example, we have Black Canada Talking, and now there's more interaction between different Black communities across the country, thanks to a podcast like yours, of course, because of the trauma. Someone like Nicole Waldron created her Victory Speaks podcast, which sort of gave, an outlet for Black people to share their expertise. And all of a sudden, we need Black leaders in our organizations. Oh, goodness. Oh, yes. So now we have to go beyond the performative, or at least make it look like we're going beyond. And we need to put, Black people in charge of something. So all of a sudden you had all these Black people who were in charge of cultural diversity and inclusion and blah, 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 all over the place. So, and this is not to knock anybody at all. These two women I'm going to mention are people I like. Here at the National Gallery of Canada, which was so white, okay? National Gallery, so white. Oh, a senior communications person is a Black woman. The person in charge of the diversity and inclusion is a Black woman. Over at the National Arts Center, they created the position of diversity and inclusion, National Arts Center. I have to say, though, the National Arts Center had already started working on the diversity and inclusion. But what happened with George Floyd kind of just accelerated things. So now we're going to have Black theater, a Black theater section at the National Arts Center after the Indigenous one. And on and on. I'm sure there are other Black people in leadership that came. But I have to think that was partly because of, what happened with last year and the things. Then, of course, we talked about the budget. Remember, we talked about the budget? So they had to build in, initiatives. We're still waiting to see where that's going to go. The budget just came out in April. But organizations like the Black Philanthropy Organization that's supposed to disperse money to help Black-led organizations serve our community, especially with the pandemic and, the needs on the ground not being that well understood by white-led mainstream. that became very important as well. And then here in Quebec, in my province, despite our premier, Mr. Systemic Racism denying François Legault, you had in Montreal Mayor Valérie Plante, who decided to create this division or directorate or whatever it is to specifically address anti-Black and BIPOC racism. She put a woman of color in charge, and now she's hired a Black former police officer to also be working there in that division. So there has been some cosmetic progress, but it's going to take at least a decade to see any sort of real tangible result.
Warren wants to come in. Go ahead, Warren. We still got to hear from Cesar, so go ahead, Warren, if it's quick.
Yeah, really quick, Cesar. I don't mean to jump in. Sir, I really appreciate what you're saying. I'm going to add value, or I'm going to be, critiquing positively here in the do no harm approach. When I hear you speak about the advancements that are happening, which are good, I'm also hearing capitalism. I'm hearing there's a huge benefit of now marketing Black. I'll give you the example. One of the things, I'm from Toronto originally, and moving to Ottawa was a culture shock. Yeah, really quick, Cesar, really quick. And one of the things that I've noticed here in Ottawa is there's a dire need to then give pets rights. Dogs have rights. Cats have rights. And when I think about it, these rights that they give these animals, and this is no point intended. Animals are cool. If you have an animal, great, but they're money makers. To get the pet groom, the dog food, the toys, the pet smart businesses out here. There's huge establishments. Huge. You go in there, you could easily spend at least $2,000 and walk with only a bag or two just for your pet. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because capitalism has figured out a way to exploit animals, right? And and I'm saying this as an example. I'm not calling Black people animals. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying here is that capitalism has now found a way to exploit Black bodies by using capitalism as the engine. This is capitalism at its best. Everybody's making money off of black misery, but yet we're not seeing the real change. I keep shifting back to education because this is important. We're not seeing the real change where we need to see it in high schools, in the curriculum. How come we can't speak about Black Canadian histories as part of the curriculum? Why can't we? That's free information. Why should it not? Are we not Canadians? So when we have this conversation, I think it's really important for us to be really critically engaged as to why these are happening. Hence the reason why I started off my talk with, I don't think anything is happening. I just think people are getting a lot of money, which is good. I think people like you should be not only known during February. I think people should know Sarah throughout the year here in Ottawa. You've been doing amazing work here in Ottawa. Why can't everybody know who Sarah is? But yet they only know you during Black History Month, the majority of these people. Why is that? Because the people are making money. They're exchanging money. So sorry, Cesar, I just wanted to mention that. I think it's really important to keep capitalism in mind when you think about these Black advancements.
Cesar?
Brother Warren and Sister Sarah make absolutely great and valid points. But before I begin regarding what has really changed 1 year later, George Floyd, allow me to give my condolences and all my Black and Pan-Africanist sentiments to the family of the Black Lives Matter activist in London, England, Sasha Johnson, who was shot in the head. It's a loss for the community there. It's a loss for the Black community worldwide as she stood up. Regarding addressing the question specifically, allow me to start with the negative. The negative that would say nothing has changed. Right after George Floyd, and even still today, Black people are still being disproportionately shot and killed in the USA as in Brazil. We know very well about the no-knock raids that even occur in Ottawa and the deaths that it has caused. and also a lot of, how can I put it, police behaviors that may seem to change on paper, but in terms of the realities of people, aka Black people and indigenous people in brackets, nothing has changed. We definitely should talk about corporate and political involvement in terms of an adaptation of language, in terms of, systemic racism and equity becoming paramount to any good speech, and sometimes it's blacked out at every paragraph, but concretely in terms of actions, in terms of policies and procedures, not much has changed. When I say not much has changed, I want to be careful. Change is not about performative actions or even just to create an equity, diversity, and inclusivity office or department with a black face. Change is to give authority and power in that department to that person to bring concrete changes and transformation of society. It's a journey. It's not something that I would expect anyone, black included, to just adapt to by a snap of the finger. But if we are speaking of concrete measures, and allow me to take the point of Brother Warren, dogs and cats in the Western world are better protected than black people. It goes all the way back to the 17th century, Le Code Noir of Louis XIV. It's a fact that many people dislike, but guess what? A white cop is more likely to go to jail for shooting a dog than for shooting a black person. On a more positive news, the consciousness that's shifting must be recognized. Although last year, so many people coming out to protest, not just in the US and Canada, but worldwide, yes, absolutely. We must mention the fact that there was a COVID, that there is a lockdown, COVID, and people getting bored, no entertainments or no sports on TV, but also the violence, the gratuitous violence of what that murderous cop, Derek Chauvin, did. But we must go beyond that moment. Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, and so many other names, as here in Canada, Abdirahman Abdi and Regis Cortez Paquet, Solomon Teka in Israel, the 5 black youth who got gunned down by police celebrating their first paycheck. So many names, Adama Traoré in France. It must not be a question of the moment. We must build on it. And building on it ultimately is beyond having whites and other non-blacks walk with us. It's beyond having some promise or even delivery of a few dollars, even if it talks about millions. Very often government dollars come with conditions and often reimbursement. It must be about the building and the strengthening of our communities through not only education, but a true sense of identity and community that must come in the recognition and acknowledgement of our blackness, our rich history. We were not just kings and queens in the past. We were also merchants. We were also craftswomen and craftsmen. We were spiritual people before the religions came to break us, before the politics divided us. And as so well said right here in Canada, we are still living in a nation where the leader of the Conservative Party does not recognize systemic racism, just as the Prime Minister of Quebec, despite countless reports and testimonies. So let us not point the finger always to the US, or remember that it's worse in Brazil, or even think that in Africa it's so much better because it's a black continent. I'm sorry. Africans, aka black people in Africa, are victims of racism in Africa by the Chinese just as the whites. And if you're a white person in Africa, you're more likely to get a job than the black indigenous person in Africa.
Yep.
This is the craziness of the situation we're talking with, and I hope we will have time to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict affecting black communities.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm also hoping that, yes, the whole George Floyd thing was over police brutality. But right now it's 2 pandemics. It's, the police brutality and the inequities that keep people that look like us impoverished and in precarious living conditions and jobs. So I'm sort of concerned that, my colleagues in the mainstream media are not paying enough attention to everything else that's associated with anti-Black racism. The redlining, the inability to get funding, our filmmakers, their inability to get funding for their projects, the way they're juried out of competitions, people who are passed over, the lack of representation in newsrooms so that, our issues, our successes, etc., go to the bottom, thereby reinforcing the stereotypes. So, I'm hoping that people will remember that anti-Black racism is not just police brutality. It's also, the employment situation, health disparities, the problems in the schools, etc. One thing I didn't mention, though, as well, is that there seems to be more support for non-police response to mental health crises as well. So I'd like to just send a shout out to 613-819 Black Hub here in the Ottawa-Gatineau area for the work they've been doing to try and really push that so that we don't get situations like what happened to Ms. Korchinski-Paquette.
Okay. Fantastic. We're going to take a very, very quick break to let our panelists have a little bit of a breath because we got some more incredible conversation coming up. And on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about COVID-19 in Canada. Where are we with the infection rates in the Black community? So
everybody,
stay
it's
locked.
Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here. What is up, everybody? It is Dr. Vibe here.
Just had an awesome experience. He is a really good interviewer.
The conversations that we have and the passion that he has for people and helping people.
So smoothly that you would have thought that we had known each other for years.
Big shout out to Dr. Vibes. I had the opportunity, the pleasure, and the privilege to join him last evening.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And you can check out more great content like this on my website. Also follow me on social media. Remember, it's Dr. Vibe, the home of epic conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. And remember, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourself grace. We are back with El in the house. El Jones, how are you, El?
Hello, all. Sorry to be late. I made it. I'm glad we're still here. I got worried when I saw all this outro stuff. I was like, no.
No, it's all good. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Whole team in the house. It's nice to see you back, Warren. Sarah, amazing to see you, and Cesar, of course. So, hey, everybody.
Good. We're going to get you in right quick on our next conversation topic, or maybe if you need a break.
I'm good. Let's keep going.
All right. So let's talk about COVID in Canada, COVID in the Black community. What are your thoughts and what are you hearing from your community when it comes to COVID?
Well, okay, I just got here and I'll jump in. I just got vaccinated, so we're slow here, so it just came down to me. But yeah, I mean, this has been a really interesting landscape. There's a Black woman on Facebook who does God's work. She's a Black doctor, and she literally just goes around and tries to encourage Black people to get the vaccine and has to intervene in a lot of conversations. And one of the things you see is, of course, and this is no mystery to us, our long history of being mistrustful of the system because of the long history of medically experimenting on us, whether that be the first hysterectomies done on enslaved Black women, right? So we were the subjects of this experimentation. And of course, that doctor's statue was only recently taken down from in front of Central Park. Obviously, Tuskegee. Obviously, our rightful distrust of the government. But it's become a sort of interesting battleground in terms of how Black you are, right? So there's this kind of idea of where the battle lines have kind of been set, if you get the vaccine, you're being less Black because you're buying into a government thing. And so I found that really interesting, not the narrative around why we might not trust people, why we might be hostile to the medical industry. That's well established because we get treated racistly by healthcare professionals. Doctors believe that Black people suffer less pain, like educated doctors come through medical school, and the majority of them believe that we have thicker skin and, we suffer pain differently. And these are all enslavement era ideas that are still active. But yeah, what I found challenging is that the ground has sort of ceded to that kind of existential ground where we start challenging how Black each other is. And yeah, there's definitely, in my community at least, there's a huge kind of discourse, kind of like, oh, if you got the vaccine, you're a sheep, you're stupid, you can do that. And then, of course, the reverse, which is the use of policing by the state in order to, instead of teaching us how to, care for each other, and instead of addressing our concerns, just using force. So the other thing that's really happening right now in my community, conveniently, because of course it's the year anniversary of George Floyd, and then Regis, and then Chantal, who was killed by the police out here, the Indigenous woman, Rodney Levi, right? So I find it convenient that we're under the longest state of emergency in Canada, and they literally banned protests. So whereas Toronto came out for Palestine, Toronto was able to come for Regis. Like, Palestinians were in their cars having a car rally and got ticketed by our police that was sent on an illegal injunction. So I find that interesting as well. So on the one hand, I'm concerned about the way that we're engaging in health and how dangerous that is for our community. But then I also think that mistrust is being further sown by officials that want to use force and compulsion around whether that's vaccines or social distancing, rather than actually bringing us to a collective space where we could possibly speak with each other. So those are my thoughts. But
okay, good start off. Who wants to jump in and follow up with that? Warren is on mute again. Can't break a tradition.
Oh, nice to see you again. It's always a pleasure. It's been too long. We need to catch up. What do I think? Elle, you're very lucky. I've been trying to get my vaccine. All right. I have been trying. Literally, there are no available appointments in Ottawa at all. All right. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Maybe they're just scanning my health card and we're like, no, not this guy. I don't know. That was a joke. No. See, I guess I just added not so good stuff to the conversation. Anywho, moving on. I really think I agree. I think with Elle, I think the vaccines are important. Just today I'm going to be vulnerable with the crowd, and I trust my vulnerability is not going to be exploited here. Just today, my 18-year-old daughter has COVID, right? Called me today and she's like, I've got it, I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. So, I don't say this to pull heartstrings here, but it is important. When it hits home, that's when a lot of people, I'm not going to say including myself, but a lot of people that I've come across thus far have said, oh my gosh, this thing's real, we have to do something about it. For the last, I'm going to more speak from experience, because I think experience is the best teacher, well, for yourself, but you hear from me. It's coming right from live and direct, right? And, my aunt has been hospitalized since January, literally in the hospital, and fighting infection after infection. And thank goodness she got her vaccine before it got worse, right? Because she was in the hospital when it was the height of the pandemic, the third wave. So, and then I also have friends who work in the hospital who tell me it is bad, right? I think what it is for a lot of people, particularly in our Black communities, now I'm going to segue back to the general part of the conversation and take me out of the purview, is that it's seeing is to believe it. It's also what Elle was alluding to or mentioned. It has to, from a religious perspective, in our Black communities, many folks in our Black communities, I should say respectfully, in terms of not wanting or considering to take a vaccine because this is the devil's work, right? And I'm not here to, tell anybody yay or nay. I'm going to tell you from experience and my own viewpoints on what based on what I'm going through. I said very clearly, I'm going to be responsible for self, and I'm going to get the vaccine. I think it's important that we know what's at stake here, right? This is not a sickness or a cold that you just get over. This is something that's plaguing the entire world. If you're paying attention to places like India is being hit very hard, right? If you're paying attention to places, you want to talk about Canada, Manitoba is being hit very hard right now, right? Hospitals are being overrun by this disease, And there, you know what? Like, this was something that I don't think anybody was expecting to happen. Let's just call a spade, right? Man-made or nature, doesn't matter. At this point, we need to figure out how are we going to keep ourselves safe and keep ourselves healthy. Now, the other point, I don't mean to dominate here, but this is an important thing to consider as well. You know, there are people, all right, that are going on social media and telling you the negative stuff about taking this vaccine, right? You know, there's one popular guy. I'm not going to mention his name because mention his name, you give him fame. So we're going to mention his name, right? You know, going around from Canadian city to Canadian city, talking about the, you know, not taking the vaccine and the propaganda and the government and this. Folks, you are your own individual. Do your research, read, listen to these shows, make an informed decision for self. I can't tell you to take the vaccine, like I mentioned earlier. I won't do that. But what's really important is that how do you remain safe, particularly in a pandemic? Don't think about the stores are closed and you can't go buy the new Jordans. You buy them online anyways. I've been doing that. But needless to say, right? It's not about buying the new T-shirt for the summer, right? It's not about just focusing on how do I get to Canada's Wonderland. It's about how do you can sustain a healthy lifestyle moving forward, longevity, right? Think about these things, right? It's important for not only yourself, but your loved ones as well. So I'm going to stop there because I said a mouthful. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, you were asking about statistics, which is startling. I've just seen some for Toronto. 79% of people who contracted COVID between mid-May and end of November 2020, racialized, Black or South Asian, okay? And if you look at, you know, where the infection rates are the highest, Peel region, who lives there? You know, Brampton, who lives there, right? Certain parts of Toronto, who lives there? In my province over here in Quebec, again, the concentration of cases and number of hospitalizations and ICU, they look like this. And South Asian, where is that? Montréal Nord, Saint-Michel, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Côte-des-Neiges. That's where you're going to find a very, very high concentration. And it's only, you know, sort of late in the game, they started mentioning the compounding reasons why we tend to be in those, you know, face-to-face occupations, the quote unquote essential workers. We're driving the buses, the metro, we're working, you know, the low wage jobs at grocery stores. We're going to be the orderlies and we're going to be the janitors and all of, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. 1, 2, we're going to live in, you know, congregate settings with, you know, multiple family members in one small space because we can't afford anything else. We don't have the luxury of, oh, we're going to go isolate here, there, and everywhere. Late in the game, for the GTA, the Ministry of Health, you know, and thanks to the urging, I believe it was Taibu that kind of, and Tropicana and them that said, look, they need somewhere to isolate. You can't tell them, oh, you need to quarantine when there's no way for them to go when they can't afford a hotel. So, you know, I know in Ottawa, they started funding, you know, like hotel rooms where you could go quarantine, etc., without having, you know, actually without having to pay, and specifically set aside for the Black community. But in terms of the vaccine hesitancy, that right now I'm seeing it's our big hurdle. And one thing I was glad to see, although it was kind of late in the game, was all of our Black healthcare professionals really stepping up. Dr. Upton Allen out of Toronto, and a lot of our doctors here at the University of Ottawa, Faculty of Health Sciences, Dr. What's his name? Kwadjo Chiremanteng, who's on TV all the time and has been since the vaccines were available. And the authorities realized that here in Ottawa realized that what is wrong with some Black people? Well, some Black people are not seeing some Black people talking to them about the vaccine. And when they see medical professionals, they don't look like that. So they're not likely to listen. Now, apparently, the uptake is better now in this Ottawa-Gatineau area because we have been attending all these different town halls by medical professionals who actually break it down to us properly with the science. And, they tell us the side effects. They tell us, who should take this, who should take that, et cetera, et cetera. But all of them, everybody, the same message. You need to get vaccinated the same way you get your MMR and all of those others, so that you don't get conditions that become chronic. And in this case, it can kill you. And it seems to be working. The vaccination rate is improving. However, like you mentioned, Warren, we still have to contend with these people who are online spreading this ridiculous misinformation. And what people need to ask themselves is, what do they have to gain by doing this? Are they getting extra clicks because people are, you have to wonder what, they would be gaining from this. I'll let Cesar speak.
Warren wants to say something. Go ahead, Warren. And you're on mute as usual.
Oh boy. But I want to say something. I'm gonna be very I'm gonna rock the boat a lot. Okay? Let me put things in perspective, folks. All right. The real reason, one of the main reasons why we need to take a vaccine, because many Canadians are nasty. That's one of the real reasons, folks. And you may think, Warren, what are you talking about? Well, let me explain here, okay? Many times pre-COVID, I would go to the gym. I kid you not. And, you see your shit. You know what you see. I think you know where I'm going with this. And I'd walk into washrooms. People would use the public washroom, eh? Go in number 2, go in number 1, and walk out that washroom like nothing had happened. And go and shaking other people's hands and touching other knobs. I was in the gym recently. They have luckily that you get to the gym here in Ottawa. Some gyms allow you to go to the gym. I tore my meniscus. Needless to say, I'm in the gym. I kid you not. A man took out a tissue in the middle of the gym and blow his nose and put it back in his pocket and do this and touch the railing. You need to tell me.
Yeah.
Think about how you get the cold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You go and touch a railing and you forget you touch a railing and go like this. Or you go pick up the hamburger and go like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
The real reason is not saying we are all nasty, because we have a lot of people who. Elle, have I lived in your house before? Dr. Vibe, have I lived in your house before?
No.
Sarah, have I lived in your house before? Cesar, have I lived in your house before? Well, he's not saying anything, but no. The point I'm trying to make here is we don't know how people clean up after themselves in their own home.
Yeah.
Facts, Warren.
Big facts. That part.
We were all clean and know how to wash your hands.
Yep.
And put on the mask.
Yep.
And don't touch certain things. Or if you touch certain things, wipe it off. We wouldn't need a vaccine in the first. We wouldn't even get the flu.
True.
So there is a reason why we need to get the vaccine. Black Canada talking then. Take it that way. All right. Sorry, Cesar.
Go ahead, Cesar.
Allow me to agree very much with all my colleagues said. And, with respect to the suspicions that us Black people worldwide have towards vaccinations, and it's very legitimate. Elle gave a good documented history in terms of, why Black people are suspicious of vaccinations, whether you talk about the Tuskegees and syphilis in the Americas or even HIV and others in Africa. But, and with much respect to my brother Warren, being vulnerable about his daughter, I myself am born in Africa. I would not be alive today without vaccines. And even when I look at my own life as an adult, I have a very rare allergy to a fruit that's too often associated to Black people, watermelon. But watermelon kills me. I am deadly allergic. Can you imagine if I went around telling people that because watermelon for me is deadly, you should not eat watermelon? And if I were to even wrap it in Pan-Africanism and white people conspiracy to make us look like apes, people will find me ridiculous. So much respect, because we all have brothers and sisters in our communities who are anti-vaccine. Much respect to them. But there comes a point when we cannot deny that this COVID situation, which is very much linked to capitalism and therefore systemic racism, disproportionately affects Black people. And as such, we must, with all recognition that yes, some people do get sick after getting the vaccine. Some people even die. But guess what? Some people also die driving a car with the seatbelt on. Are you going to stop wearing the seatbelt? Some people actually die from drinking water. Are you going to dare stop drinking water? We can go on and on and on, but there comes a point, like so many other topics, it's not a rational conversation. It's purely emotional and in terms of one person making their own choices. I am those speaking in concert with my colleagues, speaking in solidarity to Brother Warren, speaking in reflection to the child that I was, who is alive to you today thanks to vaccines. You would see my baby pictures. Some of them are cute. Some of them you're like, how is he alive? Get the vaccine, my Black people. Important also that we do see Black medical health professionals. My sister-in-law, Dr. Flavia herself, is one who was on a panel encouraging Black people to get vaccine. Do it for yourselves. Do it for our future generations.
And one thing about vaccines.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say African people invented vaccines anyway. So the idea that people are acting like this is new, like smallpox vaccine came from us. White people were dying, getting deformed, you know. And then when they're like Benjamin Franklin, it was his black slave. Like that guy was like, oh no, we take care of this in Africa. So this is our technology. It's not actually something being imposed on us by white people. It's an established technology that we actually invented, and we forget our history of science. So I just wanted to say that, Sarah.
And that's perfect, because what I was going to talk about was Dr. Keziah Corbett. Hello. I got Moderna. I was praying I would get Moderna because this Black sister was one of the people that helped develop the Moderna anti-COVID-19 vaccine. And Elle is right. Before we start spreading conspiracy theories, we need to do what Cesar often does, go way back into, antiquity, look at our very deep history on the continent in terms of herbal remedies and natural medicines, and the indigenous people as well,
All right.
Don't believe the hype. Get vaccinated.
All right. Well, folks, I know time is fleeting, so I'm gonna make a decision on one more topic.
Did we do Miss Universe? Can I talk about that really quickly?
Gotta be really quick,
I'll
because
be super quick.
you're the only person who knows about
this. I will be 2 minutes, but this is why I think we should talk about it. First of all, I know Miss Nova Stevens is probably not watching us, but I think it's really important that Black Canadians express some solidarity with her. So I'm going to do so, and hopefully, if anyone's watching and you have social media, maybe express this. So very quickly, we had the first Black Miss Universe Canada, and she's absolutely stunning. She's a South Sudanese woman, gorgeous and dark skinned. So you can see where I'm going with this. She's faced international racism, in particular from the Philippines. So they started saying that, because they're big on pageants. I don't know that they're particularly more anti-Black than anyone else is. Everybody's anti-Black, and they're anti-Black as well, and also big in pageants. So they started saying she didn't look like a human being. She was a beast. They're scared of her. Canada, how is this person repping Canada? She should be repping Africa, like all this terrible stuff. So then this young woman came on social media and made herself vulnerable and spoke about this. And because many of the people that are harassing her are Filipino, they started saying she was anti-Asian, and she got even more harassment. Then she went to the contest, and her gowns didn't show up. Filipino designer. So she didn't make the top 21 and she kept it to herself. But one of her team went on social media and said the gown showed up late and they didn't fit. And we had to like get this different gown. And it was like this whole thing. So everyone started saying she was ungrateful and disgusting and she's got bullied even more. And now this poor woman has like death threats online. Like people are telling her to kill herself. They're saying that she's a disgusting person. So I just wanted us to address it really briefly. That's all there really is to it. It's like Miss Universe pageant drama, but Miss Nova Stevens is an absolute goddess. She's absolutely stunning. She's handled herself with complete class in the face of all of this. She even apologized on behalf of her team to these designers. And I just wanted to express solidarity with her. She's an absolutely gorgeous, wonderful woman. She also is like super pro-Black. She does like Black Lives Matter protests. Like she's for the people and she's out here as our queen. And I'm not big into beauty pageants or anything, but like when we have a sister that's doing like this and facing this kind of violence, that's all I wanted to say on it. So, yeah.
Cesar?
Allow me to very quickly add to what Elle just said. I was aware of this situation. Allow me to mention that the Philippines is one of those countries, just as India and Brazil, that have deep-rooted anti-Black racism in terms of their culture. Very few people are aware of this. There is a Black indigenous population in the Philippines, the Aitas, that you do not see. And the Philippines, Filipinos themselves tend to be regarded as the lowest of Asians in terms of comparison to those who are lighter skinned, the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese, and them Filipinos tending to be darker, but also more impoverished than others. And as such, it's inward. Just another very quickly thing that I will add. Let's look back in history. We are in 2021. Some of you may remember that movie from Mario Van Peebles, Posse. Posse, that also you see the notion of Buffalo Riders.
Yeah.
It actually comes from a true fact where the children of the slaves that got liberated in 1865, the children were the first group of Blacks into the US Army. The shock to them when at the end of the 19th century, Teddy Roosevelt, in declaring war to the Spanish crown in the US-Spanish War, American soldiers went to fight in the Philippines, named after King Philip of Spain, by the way. The Philippines and the Black soldiers, descendant of Black people who were enslaved, had the shock to be fighting for a white army against, in many parts of the Philippines, indigenous Black people. This is one of those taboos about the Philippines. In mentioning that, Miss Cameroon, who was at the Miss Universe, her beautiful outfit of the lion and everything was conceived by a Filipino man, a young man. It's not all Filipinos, but it's a societal problem. And yes, Philippines, as India, Brazil, America, and Canada, France and England, etc., has a problem of systemic racism. Thank you for bringing it up, Elle, and solidarity to our sister in Nova Scotia.
Okay. Warren, how much time do you got? Because I know you're usually tight for time. As usual, he's on mute.
Go on mute. He has 2 minutes.
Sorry, 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna we'll have one last conversation piece, and you're going to start it. So if you have to duck out before we end, at least you have some input.
Okay.
I'll put it out there: the Black community and the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Warren, you start.
Okay, so number one, a lot of people may or may not know this. I'm going to start from the Israel perspective first, because there's a lot of Black Hebrews, or Black Israelites living in Israel, and they are being pushed out of Israel right now because they're not even considered to be true Hebrews or Israelites from a religious context. And I think that's the focus, particularly when it comes to Black lives in this whole conflict. I think the entire conflict is horrible. I'm not going to get too much into the religious or the land conversation, but let's focus on the Black bodies or Black people, respectfully, who are experiencing anti-Black racism, particularly during this conflict. There are people many of those people living there has been applying or applied for status for years now and hasn't received it. And now the height of the conflict is at an all-time high, not in comparison to other years. They're now being threatened to be, threatened to forced out of the country. So I think when we talk about, this conflict, I think, it's important to recognize the lives generally, not looking at race or being impacted. But since the question is particularly in terms of Black people, it's Black people who are getting this shitty, sorry, my French, the terrible end of the stick, and it's not even broadcasted. It's not newsworthy, and not a lot of people even know this. That's happened, right? These are people who have been peaceful people, growing their own food, particularly planting their own fruits and vegetables. You're praying from a religious perspective, really creating a relationship of solidarity, not only among themselves, but with other Israelites. And they're still being pushed out of the country. So we've got to think about it. Do we want to assimilate to whiteness? And if we assimilate, at what cost? Because we always end up villainized at the end. Every single time we attempt to do it. Going back to what Sarah mentioned, respectfully, in terms of, this, as things change with George Floyd, the capitalism is on the rise when it comes to Black people and exploiting our labor and our Black experience. That's what's happening. That's not assimilation. That's exploitation, right? And those who don't understand, you need to read some Frantz Fanon, please. Because when we think about what whiteness is doing to us, whiteness is always in control. Let's talk about, again, as the example I mentioned earlier, let's talk about implementing some Black Canadian history in our curriculums. Let's do that. Why don't we start there? Up to now, we can't. We had a government that implemented, not saying we shouldn't, right? That's another debate for another time. Put in a curriculum that appreciated to us LGBTQ community members and their lived experience. Then we had a government that the new or the now sitting government, reverted that to reverted the curriculum back to the curriculum of 1985 or 1990. And yet there has been no talk about Black Canadian histories. We want to talk about we're seeing changes about black people. There's no changes. It's been happening for years, people. Anyways, I'm gonna stop there because I gotta run. But
all right, Warren, how can people touch base with you?
Oh man, my new website is new.
Whoa!
So warrenclarke.ca. So go check it out. All right.
All right. Take care, Warren. Be well.
Right,
we'll chat. Keep the faith.
We'll connect.
All right. Okay. Well, folks, you got some more time, so you can continue the conversation point that Warren laid the foundation for. Who'd like to jump in next?
Sarah?
And I'm going to keep it short because Cesar really is more well versed in both of us are continental Africans, but Cesar is more likely to be able to give you a more fulsome picture. So I grew up actually my entire life. I was just telling you before the show, from age 6, my father, who was a career diplomat, we were watching the Olympics in '72 in Munich, and I'm aging myself, and I did not understand why these hooded men were having to hold up these Israeli athletes and all of this and all of that. And for whatever reason, my father decided, okay, this is the time to tell this child what the real deal is. So he explained to me about, Palestinians and Israelis and how that came about and how they were on the land and these other people came and decided, no, they need to be squeezed all the way to, a strip of land, and then the occupation and what was going on and why these people were resorting to these tactics. So from age 6, so this is over 40 years I've been hearing this, and it was different prime ministers. Like the prime ministers changed, the problem really did not. And in fact, it seemed to get more complicated with time, with the added involvement of Iran and, Hezbollah and the Lebanese next door and, all kinds of different entities. But in my mind, I'm still trying to figure out, you came to a piece of land and you found some people on that land. You tried to snatch it by force. It didn't work. So there was a war. And then all these, foreign entities intervened and helped you win. Okay, you settle on the land. Good for you. Can you not share that land? Can you not respect that there were people there before you with lives and farms and olive trees and livelihoods and their own religion and, doing their thing? No, you need to bring in people from Europe, from the US, from the UK, from France. You need to bring a whole bunch of other people so you can further settle the land. The word settle, that doesn't work for me. Occupy, so you can go, and then when those people get mad, you're mad. And you decide you have a right to defend yourself. Oh, okay. And then you put up a wall, and then you make conditions such that these people cannot get any proper gainful employment. Their economy is on its knees. The young people there have no hope, zero, nothing. They cannot aspire to anything. You have taken all their hope. Intifada, number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on and so on. You wonder why they're always in the street. Well, what else are they going to do? If they try negotiated settlements, you find ways to go and undermine that. You sabotage it, and you're back to square one. And nothing changes for them. Misery, generation after generation. What do you expect? And what really gets me, I know I'm going to come off as an anti-Semite. I am not. And I have Jewish friends. I have Jewish family, for crying out loud. But at the end of the day, from someone who comes from a country that was occupied, it was occupied from the 1800s to 1963 by white people, okay, who came from Europe and decided, oh, these savages, no, they don't know what they're doing. We're going to come here and civilize them, okay? And in fact, some of them are still there. They didn't all leave. Forgive me if I feel some sort of empathy for the Palestinian people. And that would explain partly why the African Union, formerly the OAU back in the day, decided to boycott Israel for those many, many decades, because they could sympathize with the fate of the Palestinians. And I'm going to stop there and let Cesar give like a proper.
Well, let Elle go.
And then also Cesar can close us. I'll be quick.
Yes.
Because then Cesar can finish up. Sarah, that was brilliant and wonderful. The only thing I want to add too is for the current Black struggle. So much of the technologies of policing and prisons are coming.
Yeah, the Israelis.
Yeah. So people have talked about this is George Floyd, like the restraint techniques being used.
No, those are the Israelis.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Mossad, and the way we are policed in Africa in some countries, the squads, the Secret Service, Mossad trained Israelis.
And when you go, so like our police chief trained in Quantico, the FBI, and they're trained by Israelis, and they bring that back. So it's not like we need to bring anti-Blackness into Canada, it's already here, but our cops go and train in the most racist incarcerated nation in the world, also with Israelis, and bring those techniques. So when we think about the new frontier of policing, which is like data collection, surveillance, that's all developed by Israel, or like HP products. They actually run like the data that tracks like Palestinians and keeps them out of the territories, and they apply that to us. So if Black people are saying, why does this struggle matter to us? It's across the world. Besides the fact that we should all be internationalists, is that quite literally the techniques being developed on a population, the Palestinians who are essentially in an open air prison, tomorrow show up on our bodies here. So that is another reason. That's all I wanted to say. And Cesar, go ahead.
Hey. Cesar, you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay.
Honestly, thank you so much to my sisters, Elle, especially Sarah. Brother Warren expressed himself. My comments may offend some, just to let you know, because last week on my Facebook, prior to me being blocked for a week, oh no, that's fine. When you're blocked on Facebook, it either means you did something really stupid or you're doing great work. So I am doing great
we believe it's the latter. We'll go with the latter.
Absolutely. Because I shared something, a message. It wasn't originally my message. I explained that some people did not want to understand it. Talking to Black people, stop posting about Israel and Palestine. We are Black people. We need to deal with our issues first. Regarding the Israel-Palestine situation and how it affects Black people, the focus I want to bring, when I say the focus I want to bring, first of all, everything Sarah said is absolutely truthful. Everything else said is absolutely truthful. It is not possible to deny the similarities in terms of colonization and racism that Blacks in Africa and also the Americas face. And as such, we can notably see how the links regarding police brutality are apparent. That said, I also want to be careful here in telling Black people, do not go get involved yourself per se in a conflict that is not directly your conflict. I will explain myself. I have worked for Palestine. Last year in the Black Lives Matter protests, I clearly said, free Palestine. And I remind people that we need to support the cause of Palestinian people. When I say we, I include Jewish people as well, because there are many Jews who do support a free Palestine. Free Palestine does not mean that because you're anti-Zionist, that means you're anti-Semitic. That is a lie by Israeli propaganda. It also does not mean at all that you support Hamas and rocket bombings of Israeli cities and civilians. That is a lie. And it definitely does not mean a free Palestine from from the coast to the sea, or some expression meaning to push Jewish people to the sea. That is a lie. That said, it is important, and this is the point that I wanted to highlight last week in my post. It wasn't a post, it was actually a profile photo cover. We as Black people cannot let ourselves be divided by an Israeli-Palestine conflict when Israelis and Palestinians do not divide themselves over Black lives. Perfect example. We have too many Black Christians supporting Israel because of what the pastors and evangelical pastors are telling them. In Kenya, I was sent this, Reverend Lucy Natasha holding a Pray for Israel. In the United States, we have Black people, Black evangelicals, Black from the Prosperity Church supporting Israel at any cost as part of the movement called the Christian Zionists. They are supporting Israel as the land of Jesus Christ and the rapture coming, etc., etc. You see the weight of religion intersecting with race in geopolitics, very dangerous. When from Africa, as we know, many people in Central Africa supporting Israel because they have been Christianized by force. We even have the Congolese president, Felix Tshisekedi, who went last year to APAC to basically throw himself to the APAC, the most pro-Israeli lobby group, giving DR Congo in relations. We need to be careful, because when we are saying as Black people that we support Israel, we tend to forget the fate of those that wrongfully Black people even call falashas. It's a mix-up. Falasha means the landless, the Ethiopian Jews. It's the Beta Israel who are victims of systemic racism, will protest like us Blacks in Nova Scotia, in Ontario, in the US, and in Brazil against a police state. When Black people are being pro-Israel, they are basically supporting a state that is mistreating and pushing away African refugees in an ethnocentric and Jewish state type of mentality that goes against democracy, because they fear all these Black people coming in and they're going to reproduce and their number is going to grow and they're going to replace them. I'm being truthful here. Just I'm being truthful. We were talking about vaccines. Thousands of Ethiopian Jew women in the 80s and 90s were vaccinated, aka poisoned, Provera, by the Ministry of Health of Israel, making them infertile because the belief was that Africans all have AIDS. And let's not forget that Africans are often referred to as Kushi, which means technically darker people from the Bible, Cush. In reality, they're referred to as apes. At the same time, yes, there is that Black solidarity with Palestine because of colonization. Just behind me, as you can see, the three Black leaders sitting there all voiced their support to Palestine. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Nelson Mandela. Absolutely in terms of colonization. However, I want to remind my Black people, beyond colonization and beyond police brutality, let us dare to be honest. Afro-Palestinians, you never hear about them. Google them on YouTube. They are victims of racism, and they clearly say they are victims of racism by the white Palestinians, aka the Arab Palestinians. They are complaining of systemic racism. They're complaining of being called abid, aka slaves. They are complaining of not even being represented. I'm sorry to say this. As a director in the government, provincial institutions of child welfare, regional director of equity, diversity, and inclusivity, someone like me does not exist in the Arab world, but someone like me can exist in Israel. We have to be able to have these complex strategic conversations where at the end of the day, Israel-Palestine means nothing if me as a Black person, I'm called a Cushi in Israel and I'm calling a Bede in Palestine. Of course, you have these situations that happen where even further to that, to what extent? And I am not here telling you do not support Palestine. I said it last year. I've protested. I've been on panels, but we need to, with this Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, and the fact that we are becoming more knowledgeable of our history. 2017, slaves in Libya, Black people, all these images. How many protests happened in North Africa and the Middle East, including Palestine, to end slavery of Black people in Libya? None. When we have a country like Senegal and Mauritania that are holding protests in support of Palestine, show me that protests that happen in Palestine for Senegalese and for Mauritania where Blacks are still slaves. The Haratin are still, people will look like us on the screen. In Mauritania, a country that Canada does business with, people will look like us on the screen are slaves there. This is not 1850. This is not 500 years ago. It's right now. So the point that I'm saying, I am not here to care so much to tell you be pro-Palestine or be pro-Israeli. Basically, support Palestine because they're victim of colonization, or support Israel because anti-Semitism. When you have anti-Semitism, you have anti-Black racism. It's that simple. What I'm saying is, do not let the conflicts of others divide you, because Israelis and Palestinians are not dividing themselves over anything that concerns Black people. They are not. Black people, the level of, I don't want to say mental slavery for anyone to feel insulted, but the level of alienation and the desire for us to fit in, to be accepted, is making us take in conflicts where nobody is asking for us to support them. I'm sorry to tell you this, Black people, Palestinians, just as Israelis, really don't care about Black people supporting us. They will welcome our support, but they will not risk their lives for our support. And as a last example, and I'm sorry to take the time, I will give a very concrete example of things that happen. When we have Black people in Ferguson, as so many other cities, including in Canada, just as then in South Africa, victim of police brutality, Elle said it so well, most of these police corps are trained, notably through Israeli trainers who are getting practices on the Palestinians. We must denounce that. However, at the same time I'm saying that, when we have the few Black intellectuals that we have will get to have airtime, will get to be on the screen for mass viewing. And I take the example here of our brother Mark Lamont Hill, who made a speech at the United Nations in which he said, "Free Palestine," and he ends up suffering the cost of it, notably being removed from CNN. Where was the Palestinian outrage? Where was the Palestinian protest? Where is the Palestinian person, intellectual, who has risked their career for saying Black Lives Matter? None. At the end of the day, first and foremost, I'm a Pan-Africanist, and my elders behind me were Pan-Africanists. We must never support the cause of another people when we don't have the full picture, and when at the end of the day, those who look like us in Israel are called Cushis, and our people are protesting against systemic racism. In Palestine, they're called Abid, slaves, and our people are also speaking on systemic racism. That's why I think it's important we talk about this. Let us focus first and foremost on our community. Let us support second or third level, because at the end of the day, as Elle said, anti-Black racism is global, and nobody is looking at us to support them. But too often we look at supporting the cause of other people as if we want to go throw water on the house on fire of the neighbor, and we forget our own house is on fire with our people burning. That's what I wanted to say.
Wow. That is quite a finish, folks. You see what you've done, Sarah, by joining us? What kind of madness you caused, girl? Come on now.
It's not my fault.
Well, this is the first
panel is on fire.
It's good. Well, look.
But it's important. I think our community, and I'm going to expand here because, as Elle said, in terms of internationalism or universalism, I always say universalism is a lie to Black people, because at the end of the day, everything we see,
it's not about us.
It's not about us. However, as we are progressing, and I think there's a shift that happened with last year, we have our Black communities asking, yes, we need to see more Sarahs and more Elle, but we also need to see, as we saw our sister on CBC, Ginela Massa, a Black face on CBC, we also need to have more education in terms of our history. Like I always tell Black people, stop thinking the richest man in history, Mansa Musa, is a good thing. It wasn't a good thing. I will explain that another time. But we also need to have more complex conversations in terms of, just as we just had now, regarding Israel-Palestine conflict, where we don't have all the cards. I mean, I'm going to tell you this, my brothers and sisters, the whole Black and Arab solidarity was actually a creation by the Saudi government in the early 60s as Western nations stamped out slavery and for them to get back at Israel. We are being pounded by people who don't look to stand up for us. I'm sorry to say this, my friend.
Elle had something to say.
No, not at all. I just actually have to go as well.
Okay, so Elle,
great.
How could people get a hold of you?
They can email me el.jones@msvu.ca. We can try and get it on my Facebook, but
that ain't happening.
Sorry. I'm at my friend limit and they don't let you have more. So mostly you can send me an email. And
well, look, great to have you. I'm glad no, it's all right. Glad you could join.
In May, it's kind of a jammed up day. I don't know why. And it was great to see you. Sorry to join late. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Cesar.
Bye.
Stay safe. Take care. Sarah, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I do radio, so CHUO 89.1 FM in Ottawa. They can. I co-host a show called Black on Black, and we do this kind of thing. Black on Black 891 at hotmail.com. Black on Black 891 at hotmail.com.
Thank you. And Cesar.
You can reach me on Facebook, Cesar Remy, Cesar Remy, R-I-M-Y. And my backup account when I'm blocked, Cesar. Now, if you know me, honestly, don't worry. When I'm blocked, it's a good thing. Trust me.
All right. Well, thanks to Warren. Thanks to Elle. Thanks to Sarah. Thank you, Cesar. Thank you all. This is an incredible conversation. And I think having Sarah has kicked it up a notch, as Emerald Lagasse has said. So we are so happy to have you, Sarah. Thank you so much for everything that you do, you have done, are doing, and will be doing. And that's to all our panelists. Thank you so much. I am Dr. Vibe, I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 award winner in the innovation category given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I also host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care and Dad Central. And I am the global board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. As always, I'd like to thank the people who caught this live, Ryan, LJ and Sylvia and others who I didn't get to. It's my head, not my heart, but look forward to catching this on the replay, audio and video wise. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. Aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourself grace. Thank you, BIA Media, for the great production. God bless. Peace to you all. Keep the faith and walk good.